My dad, Larry Linton, the only true servant leader willing to stand in the arena and fight for your freedoms.
Larry is a man of God, and he will move heaven and earth to protect the people in district.
Too many elected politicians act like chameleons.
My name is Mike. I'm Larry's neighbor. I bought the house behind him. I trust Larry to give me an honest answer.
And what's important to me is faith, family, and my freedom. And I believe these values are also held by Larry Linton.
More important than ever, I believe, in our lifetime to really stand up and fight for what's right. And Larry's doing that, and I'm in support of it.
We need to replace career politicians in Nashville with leaders willing to stand for what is right, even if it's not popular. People who feel a calling and are not looking to make a profession out of it.
You're not going to find a more honest, straightforward, and passionate individual, I don't believe. Larry is what you see is what you get. He's honest.
Listen, if you are looking for a true conservative who's passionate about the state of Tennessee, the people that live in it, and wanting to make a difference in a meaningful way, Larry's your guy.
Good Monday morning, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I'm still in Wyoming this week in a small town called Riverton. It sits on the Wind River Indian Reservation. Let me tell you, it's a bustling metropolis. Okay, I'm kidding. It's a quaint little town that has its own unique charm, but definitely lacks options for healthy eating, especially with the schedule I maintain working with these crews. If you follow me on social media, you might have seen some of the incredible sunrise pictures I've been sharing. That is because I am out with the well servicing crews before dawn every day. Before I get too deep into this episode, let me tell you I will be addressing the elephant in the room. And it does not have a whole lot to do with politics in Tennessee. Maybe a bit on the periphery, but not directly tied to Tennessee, as is the normal focus for this program. Now, that elephant would be the second assassination attempt on President Trump's life. That is part of the reason behind this week's title, Lies Intended to Cause Harm. The useful idiots that parrot the regime's talking point about threats to democracy, oh, we'll get into that term as well, maybe if there's time. The talking point about Donald Trump being a threat to democracy or an existential threat to our country are some of the biggest lies spread with, let me repeat, with the intent to cause harm. In fact, I would say that nearly everything the government, be it national, state, or local, nearly everything the institution created to secure the people's liberty that they tell we the people these days, they're lies. School choice or education freedom, it's a lie. Investments are a lie. One in particular that is local in Sevier County will be part of the discussion today. Government investments, yes, they are a lie. Protecting our health is a lie, as we saw during COVID, and on the lies go. So now, though, with the recap and the intro completed, let's get on with this week's episode of the Liberty Leadership and Lies podcast, where I would discuss the many lies told by the communists and their useful idiots in our republic that are intended to cause harm. Malice of forethought, in other words. So let's take a stand in the arena together again this week, folks, and get on with the show.
Welcome to the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast. On this show, we will discuss the assaults on our liberty by the very institution we the people created to secure our liberty. We will also compare and contrast the actions of people in leadership positions to the servant leadership that is needed to protect our God-given, constitutionally protected rights. Additionally, we will break down the many lies that elected and unelected officials in government and media spin every day in order to secure for themselves positions of power and influence that are antithetical to the system of government our founding fathers created and passed down to us.
Welcome to this week's show, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for tuning in again. On a programming note, I want to let you know that next week's show will be a little different as I am putting it together right now, only using video clips and sound bites from many different sources to demonstrate what a threat to liberty the Communist Party is right now. The main reason I'm doing that is that I'll be in the internet black hole next week, so show prep, recording, and publishing it will have to be done down here in Wyoming before I head up to North Dakota and Montana at the end of next week. And I'll be there the following week as well. The good news about that is that I will get to work with my good friend, fellow leadership coach, and former shipmate Carlos again. He summed it up perfectly in a phone call and follow-up text earlier this past week when he said that we get to put the Carlos and Larry show on the road again. Sadly, it will only be for a couple of days, but anytime I get to spend with good friends doing what we love to do is time well spent. Before we get really too involved with the lies spread by Kamala and the rest of the Biden regime, which includes Hillary and the commie messiah Obama, before we get too deep into those lies about President Trump and how they led to now 2 assassination attempts, we have to cover down on the lies meant to bolster the most unpopular vice president in our nation's history, and it has magically transformed her into the second coming of Obama. Mostly those lies are by omission, and they're committed by the propaganda wing of the modern Communist Party, which is the national media. And more specifically, in the lies Willie Brown and Montel Williams' side chicks spewed during their televised debate that were purposely not quote-unquote fact-checked by the media. Maybe they were spending too much time fact-checking on the fly President Trump during the debate. What we all need to realize by now is that whenever social media or the mainstream media quote-unquote fact-check Republicans or conservatives, it means they are lying to we the people. Some conservative outlets have covered these false claims already, but I feel the need to cover down on some of them as well on this program. So let's get to it, shall we? One of the most obvious lies that came out of Kamala's mouth was a regurgitation of the very fine people talking point that the commies and their useful idiots in the mainstream media have been spreading for years, despite it being debunked by even the far left Snopes website here recently. Now, why is that quite obvious lie still being spread by Biden and Kamala at this point in time? Of course, it is intended to harm President Trump. And more than just politically harm him too, because most, if not all, of the politically astute people in this country, they know the truth behind that lie. Now, there are still some low information voters that will believe it, and more importantly, act upon it. I mean, at this point in the campaign, the lie will not move the political needle very much. Kamala supporters will cheer it because it will appear to damage Trump politically, and that is a good thing in their mind, even though they know it is a lie. Trump supporters knew from the very outset that the very fine people hoax was a lie. So those two camps will not be affected by it at all in the voting booth. It may, however, have an unintended consequence of causing the independent voters to look deeper into it. And once they do that, it may cause a shift in support towards Donald Trump. Notice, though, that I said unintended consequence, because the intended consequence is to radicalize those low information voters out there to act. Harmful and deadly action to prevent Donald Trump from getting into the White House once again. So that is one of the most obvious lies that Kamala told at the debate. When the so-called moderators of the debate did not fact check her on that line, they are encouraging the radicalization of the low information, uneducated, typical commie voter out there. One of my old friends from my time attending the U.S. Army Sergeant Major Academy tried to stir things up with me about the debate. I'm sad to say that this person apparently only sees political discourse through the lens of color or the melanin content in our skin. After this retired soldier tried to gloat by stating that Donald Trump got his quote-unquote behind whipped at the debate, I shared some facts with him about what was actually said at the debate and not said, as well as pointing out that it was a 3-on-1 debate. The only response I received to that was, "Have a nice day, Larry." which is typically what happens when you discuss facts and logic versus lies and feelings with a person who only sees politics through the lens of whatever specially agreed subcategory of person the communists have pigeonholed them into. Liberty versus tyranny never comes into their mind, unless, of course, government tyranny benefits them and their government-created protected class. Which brings up another point about how I've changed the way in which I respond to the commies and their useful idiots on all of my social media. I used to get into exchanges with them on my social media posts. I believe I've spoken about this in the past with the audience here. I would respond to them not to change their mind, but to influence the people that may be reading the back and forth that I get into with them. Well, not anymore, folks. Some of that toxicity was getting into me, so I don't engage with them anymore. I just block them and then delete whatever they said or whatever they posted. And then, as I said, I mainly stopped because of the toxicity. Another reason is because it became too time consuming. I would spend hours getting into the many back and forth conversations with people I knew would not and could not change their minds, because mainly they don't have a mind of their own to change. The commies are like the Borg from that Star Trek Next Generation series. They operate from a hive mind. Another reason is because many of the people, well, not people as I found out, many of the interactions I was having were with bots or fake accounts. These are accounts that are created for the sole purpose of antagonizing conservatives such as myself. The more I engage with them, the more of the bots or fake profiles I would see commenting on my posts. The algorithm. Now that I just block and delete those accounts, the engagement with those type of accounts is way down. Their engagement on my social media post is way down. It's amazing, isn't it? That would be my advice to everyone now. If you are a conservative and make posts or share content on your social media pages and start to see accounts engage with hostility, just block the account and delete their interaction. Not only does it reduce the amount of hate and vitriol that usually accompanies those interactions, it reduces the number of bot or fake account profile interactions on your accounts. But most importantly, it will save you time and remove some of the toxicity in your life. Now, moving on to another lie that was not debunked by the quote-unquote moderators, was Kamilah's lie about Project 2025 and how President Trump would implement it if he were to win the election. Don't get me wrong here, folks. There's a lot of good stuff in the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 and how it would restore some semblance of federalism to our constitutional republic. But it is just that. It's a white paper generated by the Heritage Foundation and not the Donald J. Trump for President campaign. President Trump already laid out his agenda for what he plans to do once he wins, and it has been published for quite some time now, which is something that the commie campaign cannot state. Anyway, Project 2025 is something a think tank came up with and is not associated with President Trump at all. And in fact, everybody knew it. As a matter of fact, he publicly stated on numerous occasions that he has nothing to do with it and has purposely not read it. I know some of the people that I served with in the Navy were captured by the commies with their spread of this particular piece of propaganda as well. It is amazing how little they actually look into the subject. All they see or hear is how this particular white paper is what Donald Trump will enact if he is elected to office. Project 2025, it's no different than the 1619 project in that it is something put together by a think tank as a sort of a wish list. It has nothing to do whatsoever with Donald Trump's campaign in particular, or even the Republican Party in general. Yet the useful idiots in the mainstream media will take the child sniffer in chief's word, along with Kamilah's word, that this is what a Trump presidency will do. And just like the very fine people hoax, it doesn't move the supporters on either side, but will possibly have the unintended consequence of independent voters looking into the facts surrounding it, along with actually looking at Donald Trump's campaign platform and Kamilah's lack of a platform, and causing a shift to the former president's side. And also, like the very fine people unfact check claim, it will further radicalize the low information, uneducated voters to take radical action. Action like climbing to a rooftop with a high powered rifle or hiding in the bushes for 12 hours with a high powered rifle, so they can end this existential threat to democracy that the Biden Harris team and the useful idiots in the media keep drilling into their feeble minds. It reminds me of what Islam imams do to their followers. Anyway, I'm going to take a quick or a brief break right here and come back with a few other doozies spread by Kamala. Wow, what a double entendre there. Kamala and spread, as if downtown Willie Brown just entered the debate. Anyway, we'll discuss a few of the other lies spread by Kamala, and if not echoed by the moderators, they definitely let them stand. So stick with me. I'll be right back. Okay, folks, we're back. Thanks for sticking with me. Let's continue with the debate lies. Keep in mind, though, that these lies, which are common in politics, mind you, just like the lie that my former opponent in the GOP primary for Tennessee House District 12 is a conservative, those lies are meant to deceive people for a desired personal outcome. Or like the lie that the United States of America is a democracy instead of a constitutional republic. That is meant to deceive people and make it easier for the downhill slide from constitutional republic to an actual democracy, which will culminate into an oligarchy or dictatorship, which always happens to democracies. But the lies we have encountered from the Biden-Harris team, and even going back to Obama and Hillary, these lies in the political discourse in our nation are not only meant to deceive people, they are spread with the intent to cause physical harm to their opponents. But before I get into the debate lies again, I want to point out a local government investment lie that is being perpetuated right here in Sevier County. It has to do with the residents of a particular subdivision. And this was brought to my attention during my campaign and serves as an example of just what lengths even local government will go to so that institution can lay claim to even more of our tax dollars or more of our income. Now, I'll leave the names of the subdivision and the people that I've been corresponding with. Really, they're just keeping me informed of their interactions with the Sevier County Commission, and I'm just a casual observer at this point. I'll leave those names out of this segment so they can continue without the appearance of working with or for the arch nemesis of the Good Old Boy Network here in Sevier County. But anyway, this subdivision is now the recipient of a so-called investment into the county's expansion of sewer and water lines. I believe the money for this expansion comes from some of the bogus American Rescue Plan COVID-era government spending boondoggle, which is a topic we could spend weeks discussing, is a perfect example of how the national government wastes taxpayer money, and in doing so, puts every American into generational debt bondage. So, this subdivision that has been living quite peacefully with their well water and septic systems was notified they were going to receive or be the beneficiary of the government's benevolence in providing them with something they didn't ask for or even desire, which was city water and sewer. Now, I'd have to go back through my emails, but if I'm remembering correctly, they found out they were going to be recipients of this government boon after the work had already started tearing up their streets and lawns. There was no solicitation of input from the residents, nor was there any long or short-term notification. They found out as the work was started. And now, as the work is completed or nearing completion, there are many repairs that need to be done to the residents' streets and yards, their personal property. And government, being the great quote-unquote investor that it is, bid out these repairs to the lowest bidder. Imagine that. So now the residents are not being restored to the condition they were in prior to becoming the receiver of this benevolence of the Sevier County Commission, which is typical, right? So now these residents have city water and sewer available to them, even though they already have well water and septic systems they have been using for years, if not decades. What seems to be the problem, you may ask? Well, what comes with city water and sewer? Taxes and fees, ladies and gentlemen. taxes and fees the residents were not required to pay before the installation of this unsolicited and undesired so-called gift from the County Commission and the American Rescue Plan Act. Now, after a few emails with a couple of these residents, I advised one of them to ask for a resolution from the County Commission, and their response will actually show their intent with the unsolicited gift. After all, the residents can choose to stay on their own septic systems as well as stay on their own well water, right? What happens though? If for some reason you need to put in a new well or a new septic system, well, guess what? You need a permit for that, right? I asked this one particular resident to ask the County Commission for a resolution that states something to the effect of the county will not ever ban the residents from receiving a permit for a new well or a new septic system, nor deny them a request. Now, if the county states that they won't do that, it is because they eventually want all the residents to convert to city water and sewer, which comes with all the taxes and fees associated with a government-provided service. Let's see how that plays out, ladies and gentlemen. Given the governments, all levels of government, given their unsatiable desire for more and more of the taxpayers' money, we know the County Commission will never issue such a resolution. In fact, I believe there won't be any permits issued for wells or septic systems issued for that subdivision ever again. Time will tell, people, but the government has much more time and money than the residents and taxpayers do. So the odds are that the government will win in the end. All because most people have become apathetic to the machinations of all levels of government and have bought into the lies about government quote unquote investments. Now let's get back to the presidential debate and the unfact checked by the moderator Kamila's lies. This one's a two-for. The cackling Kamila merged the dictator on day one lie with a Putin can do whatever he wants lie. Both of which, again, were left to stand by the two of the three-member commie team that were supposed to be moderating and not fact-checking the debate in favor of the regime. The dictator on day one was a facetious joke made by President Trump during a Sean Hannity interview when he said he would be a dictator on day one by closing the border, which stands in stark contrast to the millions of illegal aliens the border czar let into our country, which the communists in Congress right now are fighting tooth and nail to allow to vote in the upcoming presidential election. And the bit about Putin doing whatever the heck he wants. Just what did Putin do while Trump was in office previously? Well, nothing. But while the Biden-Harris team has been in office, that is when Putin has done whatever he's wanted to do. Same thing with Obama's term. This is a not so sly attempt to try and perpetuate the Russia hoax. And as a matter of fact, it is completely the opposite of what Putin himself stated recently. And that is the person who Putin wants to win the election is Kamala, and not Donald Trump. I'm sure you all can remember that Russia hoax being spread by Hillary during and beyond her loss in the 2016 presidential election. A hoax that hamstringed President Trump's first term in office. The infamous PP tape and Steele dossier hoax. And it's something which she has never paid for, but I digress. But it is interesting that a made-up Hillary hoax of Russian collusion is given much more credence by the national media than is the real situation of the government of Iran actually colluding with the Harris campaign during a presidential election. Things that make you go, right? Well, they shouldn't make any critical thinking Americans start wondering, because we all know that the commies crave one thing and one thing only, and that is power. And to them, any means justify the ends of them attaining or maintaining power. So back to the Russia hoax and the attempt to continue that hoax going forward by implying that Trump said that Putin can do whatever the heck he wants. I've even had some veterans reach out to me on this point, and the low information, non-critical thinking one cannot get past that talking point even when confronted with the facts. But does it move the needle at all with voters? It doesn't sway any tyranny-loving communists that are fully ensconced in the Harris camp. It doesn't move any Trump voters away from him because we all know it is a hoax. Here again, though, it may have the unintended consequence of having the independent voters take a discerning look at the facts, and they will discover that it's a hoax. The intended consequence is, once again, to get those low information and uneducated voters to think they must do whatever it takes to keep Donald Trump from winning the presidency, even if it means trying to blow his head off with a high-powered rifle while he's out on the golf course. One last unfact checked by the quote-unquote moderators in the time we have left in this segment, folks, and that is the bloodbath lie or bloodbath hoax. This one proves a couple of points, too. The first one being is that sometimes the commies can be stupid. Not all the time. In fact, they have been exceptionally effective politically. So effective that our country sits on the precipice it does right now because they are so politically savvy. But on this particular hoax, they had their lunches eaten by the smart conservatives and the voters when they tried to trot this out. In fact, they got turned against them quite effectively. Most of America correctly knows that President Trump was referring to what would happen to the auto industry if Biden were to be reelected, and it won't change if Kamala wins either. The U.S. domestic auto industry will experience a bloodbath if the commies retain power. That lie was not told by Willie Brown's side chick to sway voters. It will not move the needle either way. Harris supporters will remain Harris supporters. Trump supporters will remain Trump supporters. Independent voters may or may not look into the matter. However, it does go to further radicalize the low information and uneducated commies all over the fruited plains, to get them to act against what the Obama, Clinton, Biden, Harris, and mainstream media machine has been calling an existential threat to our democracy. And despite initial calls for toning down the rhetoric after the Butler, PA assassination attempt and the nearly non-existent call for toning down after this latest attempt, what should be obvious is that the assassination attempts are exactly what the commies want. They tried ridiculing him, impeaching him, jailing him. Those efforts have been unsuccessful. And as Tucker Carlson rightly pointed out months and months ago, the next, in their mind, logical step to getting rid of Donald Trump is to kill him. All of these lies being spread by the mainstream media at the behest of the commies in power are meant for one thing and one thing only. They are intended to cause Donald Trump the ultimate physical harm. They want him dead so they can maintain their grip on power. Well, that's it for this week, folks. Stick with me after this quick break for God's Word along with my closing thoughts. And with that, we'll be right back. As always, ladies and gentlemen, I want to offer my sincere thank you for watching or listening this week. Please do me a favor and go ahead and download the Rumble app and subscribe to the show there. It's completely free. You can also watch the show on ScrewTube as well. Give the show a thumbs up on either of those platforms. If you are listening to the show on Apple or Spotify or any other podcast platform, please subscribe to it there as well so you can get notifications when an episode is released. As most of you know, they are typically released at 5 a.m. Eastern Time every Monday morning. If you would do me another favor as well, if you like the show, this or any other episode, please share it on your social media accounts. Keep in mind, though, if you start getting nasty comments, you can do what I do. Block the account and delete the comment. Your lives will be so much better. It has definitely improved mine. This week's wisdom from God's Word comes to us from the book of Psalm, chapter 101, verse 7. No one who practices deceit will dwell in my house. No one who speaks falsely will stand in my presence. Now we know these deceivers will not find a home in God's house until they repent, but we can also deny them a place in our house. We can deny them their ability to spread their deception using our social media accounts as a vehicle. We can also point out the deceptions to those who have not made up their mind about which candidate to support in this upcoming presidential election. I don't see how it is possible that there are those out there who are still undecided between the choice of freedom and tyranny. But apparently, there are still some people in our country that are not convinced one way or the other yet. We can use truth and facts to counter their deceptions. We must. It's not hyperbole that this upcoming presidential election is the most important one in our lifetime. It doesn't take a very discerning eye to see what direction our country will take from a presidency from either one of these candidates. We already have evidence of their actions while in office. Now, if you live in a state where early voting has already begun, please go out and vote. And take as many people as possible to the polls with you that you can. Early voting will be taking place in Tennessee during my next break between this engagement and the following one. I, along with my wife and daughter, intend to take advantage of early voting. In fact, I'll be offering rides to the early voting locations for any Republican voter in Sevier County that wants one while I'm home. And I encourage my fellow Sevier County Republicans to do the same. Vote early and bring as many people with you as possible. That is it for this week, folks. Until next week, stand in the arena with me. Reveille, it's time to wake up.